Hello everyone, today I'd like to talk about Chuck Mangione. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but that's how I've always pronounced it, and I think that's how I've heard of it at first when I learned about Chuck Mangione. And I apologize beforehand if I'm mispronouncing it, but the reason why I wanted to talk Chuck, as some of you viewers may already know, he passed away recently, this past week. And you know, I don't think the news got out till a few days later, and I heard about it just yesterday. So I was pretty in shock, mainly because, I first of all, I don't really think about like artists, people, and their age and so forth. That's not my thing. I always think Chuck, and he's still alive and well. And another thing is, I have this version, his greatest hits, this particular CD, in one of my cars that still is an old school car, and it still has a CD player, actually a 6 disc changer, and this one is essentially permanently in slot 4 of that 6 disc changer. So and I've been listening to him from time to time when I drive that car. So it's kind of like, wow, somewhat very surprised that all of a sudden he passed away. And besides that CD in my car with Chuck, ever since I knew about Chuck Mangione and his album, and up till maybe King of the Hill, I don't really, hear about him much in the news or anything like that. New album standpoint and so forth. So outside of me playing his CD or some of his records, just kind of like a normal thing until you hear his recent past. So I want to talk about Chuck a bit. And when I first heard Chuck Mangione, I didn't even know who he was. It was the song "Feel So Good," and I think a lot of people would be in the same boat as I am. And for me, "Feel So Good" was the short version, the radio edit version that I heard, and this was on smooth jazz radio, smooth jazz stations, the actual radio stations, not the internet or anything. And this was in the 90s, 1990s, and when I first heard it, loved it. Like, wow, this is great stuff. And trying to figure out who that was. Usually, back then, I would wait until the radio station goes to break, and hopefully they would talk about who sang what, you know. But it took me a while to find out who it was, and it was Chuck. The thing about "Feel So Good" is, at that time, yes, it was on a smooth jazz radio station, but it sounded better than majority of the songs that were being played on smooth jazz radio. So that's why I needed to know. It not only it was really melodic and everything, but the sound, the horn was pretty unique when compared to everyone else. So and later on I found out it was a flugelhorn, which me not being a music guy whatsoever, I didn't know any of the instruments, names, things like that. I wouldn't know what a flugelhorn was. I probably knew what a French horn was, or not knew, but heard of a French horn over a flugelhorn. I never heard of a flugelhorn before. So that made the sound unique. And really anything Chuck Mangione plays, later on when I knew his sound, his music, and so forth, I can instantly recognize, his playing. So, anyway, so at that time, it took me a while in the 1990s, trying to find. Once I found out who he was, now first thing I would do is like go to the library or something, see if there's any albums out there that I could like borrow, but nothing on Chuck. And you would have to go to the stores, and like a Best Buy, Circuit City, Tower Records, or a lot of those music stores back then. And I finally, the album I saw mainly was this one, and this is essentially his compilation, his first real like greatest hits album. And this was the album I was targeting as a kid. Um, Targeting in the sense I wanted to get this, but waiting for it to be discounted or something on sale, things like that. This album was pretty much the one you would find in the record stores. You may be able to find this one, his Feel So Good, for obvious reasons, but this was the one I was targeting. And eventually I got it. I think in 1996, 97 or something. I had to ask my dad, hey, it's on sale, it's on sale. And my dad didn't hesitate because he knew Chuck Mangione. Of all artists, he's not a music guy whatsoever, but he knew him. He knew him by name. So it wasn't much of a hard convince to get it. And when I got this album and took this home and listened to it, the Feel So Good is the very first track on this album. And it sounded different to me than the radio one I heard on the Smooth Jazz Radio. It's the same song. It's just edited very short. This is 9 minutes long, 9+ minutes, where the radio edits like 3.5 minutes or something like that. So it was missing 2/3 at least, or maybe around 2/3 of the actual album version, and that's why it sounded so different. And I absolutely, hearing it a couple times, I absolutely love this version over the radio version, because the radio version seems like it just gave you the melody, the hook, and his flugelhorn playing, and that's it, nothing else. You're not, you're getting the appetizer, and that's it. You're not getting the main course, dessert, and have you. So damn, it's totally different. Now, this is the album. And this is the only album I had for the longest time of Chuck. And that's all I really needed, because, I listened to it. I loved every song on it. And believe it or not, Feel So Good wasn't my favorite song on here. It was Give It All You Got. It was the kind of the theme song, I guess, for the Winter Olympics in, 1980? I don't know. But that's my favorite. But all of them were, to me, bangers on here. So not a bad record on here at all. And so when I heard about his passing, I kind of read about it, and usually you'll find a couple stories here and there of his history, things like that. And there's a lot of things I didn't know about besides Feel So Good and King of the Hill. And with King of the Hill, I only watched like a half a dozen, no, I wouldn't say half, but maybe 10, 12, 20, maybe a couple dozen episodes of King of the Hill. I'm not a fan of those types of shows, that animated shows like that. I don't know why, just never got into it. But there's 1 or 2 episodes for sure that I remember seeing, and it had Chuck Mangione on it. And he was like working at the mall or something, or some type of mall or something, and then basically he would play at the end Feel So Good, or it would lead to Feel So Good. So, and reading about him, I didn't know from my impression of all the stories about him and things like that, or how like jazz critics and things like that, I didn't know there was like a 50-50 like love or hate relationship with Chuck. I don't know why. I never understood why, and I never got that impression when I was listening to Chuck all these years until reading about these stories recently. And I get the impression like it was, some people think he was like a sellout, right? Where he kind of changed his music, or his music was tailored towards smooth jazz. And a lot of people basically put Chuck into the smooth jazz category. Here's the thing, when I got Chuck and this album, his compilation album, and listening to it for all these years, I never really had the impression this was smooth jazz. I never put Chuck into the smooth jazz category. Now, it may have some smooth jazz elements to it, and yes, Feel So Good was being played on smooth jazz radio all the time, actually. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard a week or a couple weeks without hearing "Feel So Good," the radio edit version. And but even then, I never considered Chuck a smooth jazz artist. For me, smooth jazz, and you can see my other video I had, my earlier video where I did the Rippingtons and the rise and fall of smooth jazz. You can, if you want to interested in how I got into it, that's and my opinion of smooth jazz, that would be the video to watch. But with Chuck, the main reason why I don't put him in smooth jazz is because if you listen to any of the songs, especially on that compilation album of his, it does not really have a smooth jazz feel or vibe to it. And it has some elements of sound, but then again, any I wouldn't say any, but a lot of jazz would have some elements of smooth jazz, but I wouldn't consider it smooth jazz. Even fusion jazz in the 70s would have smooth jazz elements to it, but no one would take, you know, fusion jazz into smooth jazz. I don't know if you consider Weather Report smooth jazz artist or group, but I don't think so. And to me, Chuck is really kind of in between and of smooth jazz and traditional jazz. So that's how I always felt Chuck was. But I think from what I've read, majority of people who listen to jazz would consider Chuck a smooth jazz artist. That's number one. And number two, because of that, he would be considered like a sellout. Now, it wasn't explicitly said as sellout or anything. I think sellout is very harsh, but it's more of he tailored his music for the populace, the mainstream people like myself, rather than the more hardcore jazz traditionalists, listeners and things like that. The more artsy kind, from an artistic point of view. And this is where I kind of disagree, and I really hate the pigeonhole of, you know, you're either smooth jazz, you're mainstream top 40 popish, rather than the traditional, you know, jazz, whether it's hard bop, bebop, whatnot, you know. I don't know. I hate that where people have to categorize that one way or another, and I don't think Chuck is in that category at all. Of yes, he's popular, but he's popular because his music's damn good. I mean, it's to me, it's jazz in a more traditional sense. It still has that creativity. It has improv. It has that technical playing musicianship that you would expect from, you know, a good jazz artist. But the music, the composition was done in a sense that it's very pleasant. It's very accessible to the ears. It's very melodic. That anyone would listen to it, can pick it up, can understand it, can feel the vibe and everything, and at the end of the day, enjoy it, enjoy listening to it. And that's what I think Chuck is. He's in that category. Now, he's not like your typical like smooth jazz. When I think smooth jazz, I think of like 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, and they start using the kind of the drum machines and things like that, and you would just like either like play a horn on top of it or things like that, and the worst of the worst, it would become more of a cover of pop music of the day. And that's to me kind of like the smooth jazz genre. Now obviously it's not all of it, but that's smooth jazz. Chuck Mangione and all the records and albums I've listened to is not that. It's not that at all. A lot of people say he actually started the movement with Feels So Good. He may have helped push it, but when I think of smooth jazz artists that started it, especially if you're talking about in the 70s, I think of like Earl Klugh, Grover Washington Jr. to a certain extent, George Benson. You know, those artists to me, I think, were the ones that started it, not Chuck Mangione. So, again, even think of Chuck Mangione as a smooth jazz artist, but people think so. And from Feel So Good, maybe that's why. I don't know. But now, it may not be as technical from a composition, or technical from a like playing musicianship, as when you compare it to like Miles Davis, or John Coltrane, Giant Steps being like the one that's always like, hey, if you want an elite jazz album, jazz composition, you always listen to Giant Steps or something like that. Now, Chuck Mangione's music may not be like that, and maybe that's why a lot of people don't like it. I don't know, but you know, at the end of the day, if it's music, as an artist, if it's a music you create that you enjoy creating, you enjoy playing, as well as people who listen to your music also enjoy, who cares, right? I mean, it at the end, and that's same thing for smooth jazz. And I was trying to make that point earlier, that who cares if it's something people like to listen to, if it's not your in the traditional sense, the way it's composed or played, or both. Who cares, right? I mean, you do what you do that you love doing, and if people enjoy it as well, more the merrier, right? So that's what I always think of. And when I compare to John Coltrane, like I brought up John Coltrane for just the Giant Steps composition. If I had to listen to one artist between like John Coltrane, heck, the artists back in the day, Miles Davis, all those artists, Dave Brubeck, things like that, and Chuck Mangione. If I had to listen to one artist, pick one artist that I would have to listen to all their records constantly, I would pick Chuck. I mean, it's not no this to John Coltrane, Miles Davis. I listen to them too, but if you had to have me choose only one artist and listen to basically all their records consistently, it would be Chuck. And that kind of tells you how much I'm into Chuck. And now, obviously it's a preference, subjective, but I'm willing to bet a lot of people would do the same too. Okay, and it's mainly because of the music, right? So, anyway, I wanted to talk about Chuck a little bit. I do want to show what albums I have. I picked up since the pandemic, and so I wanted to get away from just his greatest hits. I wanted to explain. I have listened to his albums when it first came out, and he has made not one bad album at all. Starting with, I think this is when he first got popular, the Friends in Love. This is where Hills Where the Lord Hides. This one was a bit different than the one that is on the compilation, but highly recommended. I think this is when he first got popular. And keep going on. I think this is his most popular one, obviously, his Feel So Good. Fantastic album. Had every right to be as popular as it should be. There's no complaints in here. Bolivia, which I actually like more. I think he won a Grammy too with this album or song, not sure, but fantastic album. Main Squeeze, this one's okay. I liked it. It's kind of more of a newer version of him, and I did enjoy this album. Chase the Clouds Away, I think this was also a popular album back in the day. This is when he was on A&M, as well as the Feel So Good. And here we go, also another A&M record, I believe, Fun and Games. I like this one a lot. This is the one, Give It All You Got. This is the one that's my favorite song of his, Give It All You Got. It's on there. I also got another concert of his. Not sure when this was, but this is Together. Chuck Mangione concert. And oh, I still got more. A couple more. Children of Sanchez. I love this one. And I think his final. I think he made a few more albums after this, but I think this is his last popular album. Was Love Notes. So got this one. As I mentioned earlier, there's not a bad album on here. Every album's listenable. There's nothing that's really bad or what I consider sellout or being like smooth jazz bad. Nothing at all. I've enjoyed all the records, albums I've listened to, and as I mentioned, at the end of the day, if you like the music and Chuck loves the music he wrote and composed and loves to play it, he's good. Nothing wrong with that. And again, I'm just commenting on some of the opinions that were brought out when I was reading about him and his passing. So anyway, just wanted to bring up Chuck. I would say Chuck is one of my favorite jazz artists growing up as a kid when I started getting into jazz. Smooth jazz got me into jazz and understanding jazz a bit. It got me into, trying to pick up other artists like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, even though it's totally different style of jazz, but it got me into it. And Chuck got me into a lot of the transitional period, the 70s period, the fusion, things like that, where originally I heard I got into Miles Davis, his late 60s, 70s period, and I actually didn't like that at all. I thought the 70s period was kind of weird, experimental. I guess it's experimental, but I wasn't a big fan of it. But Chuck got me into the 70s, got me into that era where, Herb Alpert, I knew him from the Tijuana Brass, but I didn't know him from his solo stuff. Same period time. And then the George Bensons, the Earl Clues. I got into a lot of from the beginning with the big band stuff, Miles Davis, Dave Brubeck, all the way through smooth jazz. To me, Chuck is everything in between, the great stuff that's in between. And I thank him for that. I really do. And I wish I was able to, see a concert of his or, something like that, or actually meet him in person. He's a big influence in my music and jazz listening as a kid. And, I'll never forget that. So, farewell, Chuck Mangione. Farewell.